I appreciate this invitation. The last time I was asked to give a presentation on methodology was 1982. And I've been waiting patiently for this. And here I am. My time has arrived. I had a very narrow objective. I was working with Olivia Mitchell, Ari Kaptein of Rand, Jeffrey Brown of Illinois, Olivia's with Wharton School, who were planning quantitative experiments. Jeff on the impact of framing information, how to frame information about when to claim Social Security benefits. He reported that earlier today. And Ari on the impact of peers on when people decide to retire and claim benefits. My job was to help them. And to do that, focus groups seemed useful. I'll tell you a little bit about why. But first, let me tell you, we did 10 focus groups with people who were approaching retirement age and therefore interested in this type of information and interested in being impacted by peers. We surveyed people who expected to receive Social Security benefits, of course, and we interviewed included people who were in excellent or good health, because we didn't want health to be the factor that led them to decide when to retire or when to claim benefits. We wanted to be more their quote-unquote free choice. We knew income was important, so we had groups separate with people with different levels of income, as you see. And one of the great things about doing focus groups to prepare for a survey is that finesse is one of the issues about focus groups. They're not generalizable. We have very small samples. We had 100 people in 10 groups. They're not randomly selected. Among other things, you attract people who are willing to take an evening out and go to a facility and also available that evening. So beyond that, we don't really get a random sense of the population. In a survey, everyone is asked the same question in the same order, and you can understand the effects, the biasing effects of previous questions. In focus groups, that cannot happen. Different questions come up, different comments are made by different participants that cannot be controlled and should not be controlled. And finally, there are techniques of dealing with this, but there's always the impact of persuasive people who are well-spoken, who present themselves as having certain credentials or expertise, who are just powerful individuals. Now, you can have people write things down in advance, but or do other things to contain that, but there is that impact. That's not a problem when you're following the focus groups with a survey, because then those quote-unquote problems are finessed. This is what focus groups do in part. They help understand the impact of a stimuli. Once you start the survey, there it is. And as an example, Jeff Brown did a great researcher and wrote different statements with information about when to claim Social Security, but issues came up. There's a lot of sensitivity to cuts and how cuts are being, especially from a government agency, that had to be carefully spent. As I'll talk about later, he wanted to see, presenting it as consumption versus investment, and certain words just didn't work because people don't look at what they get back from Social Security as a return on investment. There's just a lot of sensitivity to the impact of claiming on Social Security solvency. Why are they telling me when I should claim? Does that mean that they're going to run out of money? It's going to affect them negatively if I claim at this age versus the other age? And it was useful to include that in the stimuli. In other words, we learned things which made the stimuli more effective and helpful. And the same thing on question wording. Ari Kaptein had a question in asking people about when they gave them information about when peers claim Social Security, when do you expect to claim? And gave them a range of ages. That's reasonable, isn't it? Except some people said, well, I'm not going to claim. I think I'll die before I do that. Now, how should that be handled? That's a possibility. Should that be included in the questions? So you learn more about how to pose questions, and I think you also help you develop your hypotheses when you hear people talk about the subject that's interesting to you. Now, beyond that, you can explore new issues, and I'll get to this a little more, but one of the issues that came up about peers, as an example, is that we were thinking about people who were closest to the person being influenced. But in terms of issues about when to claim benefits, it's people who retired who in some ways the more impactful, more about that. So in some ways it's a new set of peers because they had some information to report that made them influential. And then finally, I think, and this is what I really want to focus on, when you're doing surveys, the new hypotheses, new ideas, new questions don't come up. You have a contained universe of answers to the questions you've raised. But when you're doing focus groups, if you're paying attention, a lot of new ideas come forward, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them. So keeping with methodology, but illustrating, and I couldn't help but give some findings, we found that there are real limitations to peer effects when talking about when to leave the labor force permanently. Peers have a tremendous amount of impact. Our focus group showed in terms of what movies you see or what restaurant you might want to eat at or things of that nature. But when to retire is a financial issue. And people don't talk that much about their finances and what they have. And that limits the impact of conversations about it. Also, surprisingly, peers are people who are similar to you. Basically, that's the way it's defined. But your peers are not necessarily similar to you in finances. And the participants told us continuously, frequently, most of them, that even the people with the same job as I do started when I do are different because they bought a house differently, because their spouse is different. So there's a sense of dissimilarity from peers. And that made what their experience was and what they said less impactful on what they decide to do. And finally, there's this issue of the people who are closest to them in some ways, their coworkers, who do retire earlier, who could tell them about what happened, disappearing. They retire and they don't go back to work. They're gone, and so their influence is curtailed. So we found some of the limitations of peer effects on when to claim. But on the other hand, we did find something we did in effect, that reports, and this is, let's call it a hypothesis for testing in quantitative research, reports of the retirement experience did have an impact on people as they reported. Some people say that retirement is fun. They meet with their friends all the time. They have less stress because they're not in the office, and it's not expensive. They can afford it. And other people say they're lonely, they're depressed, they're isolated, and it sure costs more than I thought. And depending upon which the peers say, influences people, they say, qualitatively, about what they plan to do, and are they encouraged or discouraged from stopping work. So it's sort of, we learned some things we didn't expect, I think, about peer effects on this particular issue. We also found some things I hadn't even thought I was focused on, the importance of the estimated benefit reported on your annual Social Security statement. We were talking about claiming, and this issue came up. That's a number for these people, 51 to 60, that people focus on. They look at the estimate they get, and it's important to them, and they base their planning on that number. They expect to get that number. And it's funny, even when the Social Security statement says, as you know, in 2037, only 75%, the trust fund will only have enough to pay 75% of the benefit. You should know that. Even with that caveat, they believe that will be the number. But one thing they don't know is that Medicare premiums are deducted from the benefit. And for many of them, the Social Security benefit is taxed, which reduces the number. And when they're informed of these potential deductions, there's a strong sense that this information should appear in the statement, because what they want, and one person said it very, very well, I want to know the final number. The net number is better than having the gross number. They expect it to be the net, what they will actually get. And that's important to them, isn't it, in terms of their own planning? And the statement doesn't tell them that, although they think it does. So that's something I think bears more research and addressed in some way. Now, of course, what are they going to pay in Medicare premium? It's kind of tough to know what it will be in 2037. So it's impossible to estimate. Well, in discussing this, the best idea, or one of the ideas they brought forward, was just give me what the premium was for the last 3 years. You know, I'll know that it's not a projection or a prediction or an estimate, but it'll give me some sense of what it is and how it's growing in these financial times. So I think that's another example of how a focus group could be used to generate ideas and, in fact, generate solutions. There's a powerful loss aversion Break-even analysis is often used by financial advisors, and I think it has been in some cases by the Social Security Administration, to help people decide when to claim benefits. And the break-even analysis says if you're getting, let's say, $1,200 a month, and you delay for 1 year, you'll give up $14,400. But you'll get more each and every year, and by age 78, if you're 65, you'll be doing better. And I ask people, how long do you expect to live? 85, 89, my mother's still alive at 93. I'm going to live well beyond 78. Now with this information, what does this tell you to do? Take it as soon as possible, because I don't want to lose. It's possible I'll die before 78, and I don't want to lose, even though they're worried about outliving their resources. It's very different in terms of decisions about when to retire for the high and moderate income people and the low income people. The lower income people are very often find their work physically hard, stressful, and unpleasant. And where a lot of moderate income people, especially higher income people, enjoy the work, find it sociable, find it even a good place to go, a lot of lower income people don't. And considerations about when to stop working are very different for those two groups. The lower income people find themselves often between a rock and a hard place. They're afraid they're going to die early and their life expectancy is lower. They want to have some retirement and they feel they can't afford to. It's a very different conversation. Another thing we found that surprised me, I knew that concerns about solvency, about Social Security is widespread. But I didn't understand, and we got this indication, that some people feel you're safe if you're claiming benefits. And if you're not claiming benefits, it could be cut back. And for some people, the threat of reduced benefits leads them to think maybe I should do it now, lock in when I can, before they cut me, because if I'm not locked in, I'll be cut. I'd rather have the $15,000 annually now than get an extra $100 per month. Waiting could be a problem because I can see the day when the government will not be able to make those payments. So another thing I think worthy of some consideration. Strong sensitivity to messages from government agencies. Again, we tested framing statements, and the initial statements had words that were considered harsh. If you can get the maximum benefit 70, but if you, for every year prior to that, you claim you'll have permanent cuts. Too harsh. Negative reaction. You can use the benefits to pay for goods and services. Pretty neutral and inane, right? I don't want them telling me what to do. Now, part of this might be this climate about the government. I don't like the phrase paying for goods and services. I'll pay for whatever I want to pay for. So I have to be sensitive to that. And again, this is an example of things you learn from focus groups you can't get in other ways. And the last thing I want to say is people really trust the Social Security Administration. They accept, as I indicated before, Social Security estimates information without question, even when the Social Security Administration says you shouldn't trust us because we're not going to have the money in 27 years. Information from the Social Security Administration is considered important and worth reviewing by people who don't seek out the information. So here, there's so little trust in some ways in our society, and maybe especially about financial matters. But here we have an organization which is trusted and believed in, and has resources that for some reason people don't use. And I think that's an interesting thing to be explored. So anyway, focus groups can help you prepare for quantitative work by reviewing questions, raising ideas for new questions, helping define stimuli, but they can also come up with new and unexpected findings that are very valuable, and I think that's one of the reasons why they probably should be used more than they are. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.